Okay, so seems like I will have to record this lecture in chunks. My computer keeps shutting down and then I have to reconvert all of those uh, videos again. All right, so let's get done with this here. What enzyme is released from the salivary glands to begin the breakdown of starch? Salivary amylase. What enzyme is released from the pancreas into the small intestine to continue the breakdown of starch? Pancreatic amylase. How are proteolytic enzymes activated in the stomach and in the small intestine? So we have pepsinogen in the stomach, which gets activated in the presence of stomach acid into pepsin. And then you have pancreatic proteases like trypsin and chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase, which get activated there. What is the function of bile salts in lipid digestion? They cause emulsification of fats, and emulsification is pretty much like adding dish detergent to clean up oily, greasy dishes. Is this considered chemical or mechanical digestion? Chemical digestion. How do micelles and chylomicrons function in lipid digestion? Micelles and chylomicrons are these globules of fat that help carry your dietary fat from the intestine into the bloodstream. Where does nucleic acid digestion occur in your small intestine? Under the influence of ribonuclease and deoxyribonuclease in your pancreatic juice. Explain the details of vitamin B12 absorption. That happens in the stomach due to the secretion of intrinsic factor from the parietal cells of the stomach. The intrinsic factor helps your body digest and absorb vitamin B12, which is needed for healthy red blood cell formation, right? Okay, so finally, we are done with chapter 26. And so let's go ahead and start with our next chapter here, which is chapter 27. And that has to do with nutrition and metabolism. So let's take a look at that. So nutrition, of course, is the science of how nutrients are obtained and how they sustain life, right? And when you talk about nutrients, what does that include? That includes biomolecules, which are basically carbohydrates, fats, or lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, four, right? Vitamins, which are, again, organic compounds that are needed for maintaining your metabolism, and minerals, which are inorganic compounds. Again, the difference between organic and inorganic is organic stuff is only derived from living things, while inorganic substances are not derived from living things. So in other words, vitamins are only synthesized by living systems, and minerals are obtained from the earth, right? So they're non-living. So that's the difference. And water is not considered a nutrient typically, okay? Um, but you do need the biomolecules, the nutrients for all of these functions, life functions, growth, reproduction, maintenance, all of that, right? So then you divide nutrients into macronutrients versus micronutrients, and that has to do with how much, what amounts of each do you need. So if you need relatively large quantities, those are called macronutrients, like the three biomolecules, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Micronutrients are the ones that are needed in smaller quantities, like vitamins and minerals, right? So then essential versus non-essential, what does that mean? So essential nutrients are those that you have to obtain from external sources from your diet. Non-essential nutrients can be synthesized by your own body, okay? They're not required in your diet. For example, vitamin B and K are non-essential because your gut's own microbiota, the bacteria in your gut, can synthesize them, right? Vitamin A, on the other hand, is essential because you need to eat stuff like carrots and other uh, carotenoids in order to get that. So then RDA, that stands for recommended dietary allowance. How much of each nutrient must be obtained each day? So Food and Nutrition Board was the original regulatory body that set up those RDAs for us, right? And they basically, uh, now they're not tailor-made. They're not tailored to each individual. We are all genetically different. The way we metabolize our food and use our energy is quite uh, variable, right? So as you can see in the future, you can actually use your own genetic makeup to generate your own RDA. So two people weighing 200 pounds, one is fat, one is more of muscle. Obviously, it's a different situation there. So list the 6 nutrients required by the body: carbohydrates, lipids, um, proteins, nucleic acids, vitamins, minerals, and I guess they're including water here as well. Distinguish between macro and micronutrients. Macronutrients you need in larger quantities, micro in smaller quantities. What is meant by the RDA? recommended dietary allowance of nutrients. How much of each type should you consume on a daily basis? So we get calories from the food that we eat, and a calorie is actually a unit not of energy necessarily, but of heat or temperature. In other words, a calorie is the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So the food that you're eating is thermal heat energy. Okay, and kilocalories is like 1,000 calories. So that's basically what we are looking at here. Let's start with our first class of biomolecules, which are carbohydrates. They come in these three different forms, monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides are simple sugars, 6 carbon sugars like fructose, glucose, and galactose. Disaccharides, di means two, so two simple sugars together like maltose, that is a glucose plus another glucose, or sucrose, that's a glucose plus a fructose, or lactose, which is a galactose plus glucose, right? And then polysaccharides are long chain carbohydrates like starch and cellulose and glycogen. Starch is plant polysaccharide and glycogen is animal polysaccharide. All right, so sugars, as we mentioned before, are these. Monosaccharides are those three, disaccharides, and then some others like dextrose, brown sugar, honey, molasses, etc. Those are some other classes. Uh, so starch, as I mentioned, is only gained from plant sources, okay? And sometimes we also use starch as thickeners and stabilizers, like cornstarch, for example. Starch is a uh, great source of complex carbohydrate, right? So because this is not pure sugar, that is sugar in a polysaccharide in a long chain formation. So it takes time for your body to break it down into sugar. So it's much healthier than this processed free sugar that you might put in your tea or coffee or something like that, because that is going to increase your insulin levels. Your insulin spike will be much more pronounced with that. Fiber, even better. Fiber is like fruit skins, right? And basically, as you can see here, berries, nuts, oatmeal, all of that are good sources of fiber. Fiber, again, is complex carbohydrate. It takes time for it to break it down into glucose. It's healthier. It doesn't cause an initial insulin spike and predispose you to diabetes, okay? So glucose is not considered essential, and that's interesting. Why? Because even though glucose is the basis of all energy processes in your body, your brain exclusively feasts on glucose. Well, it's not considered essential because other foods can get converted into glucose. You don't need pure sugar to get glucose, right? So even starch and fiber, even proteins and fats, if needed, can be broken down into glucose by a process called gluconeogenesis, as we can see here. So fiber, even though they are not digested, they pass out of our gut as is, right? Like fruit skins and oat and all that, but they're extremely important because they add bulk to the food that you eat. So they make you feel fuller so you don't overeat. Secondly, they regulate your bowels. So you're able to pass out uh, all of the indigestible material in good amounts of time, right? If you didn't have fiber in your diet, fiber is also called roughage, then you would be at risk for developing constipation, right? And chronic constipation uh, is actually a risk factor for colorectal cancer. Okay, so not only does it prevent constipation, but also colorectal cancer. Because colorectal cancer is all about how much time is spent for that food just sitting in your gut, coming in contact with the epithelium. So the more of the, especially fatty foods, animal-derived foods that are sitting in your gut and coming in contact with your epithelial lining of the intestine, the higher your chance of developing colorectal cancer. So fiber prevents that. It also lowers cholesterol. How? It literally coats the cholesterol, the waxy fatty stuff from animals, and pulls the cholesterol out of the intestine when you go defecate. So it literally physically gets rid of the cholesterol as well. All right, next up we have fats or lipids. They come in these different types, as you can see, triglycerides, phospholipids, um, steroids, and eicosanoids. All right. Triglycerides is the most common storage form of fat. So any extra calories that you consume, they turn into triglycerides. And this is this was one of my initial struggles. So about 10, 12 years back, I got a blood test done on my lipid profile, and I at that point suffered from hypertriglyceridemia, which is partly genetic in my case from my mother's side, right? hypertriglyceridemia, high levels of triglyceride uh, from my maternal side. And so, well, I did have the genetic propensity, but it did not happen overnight. It had to do with me over consuming, overeating, extra calories, and not nearly getting as much physical exercise. All right. And so, then I started to go on a diet and started eating smaller portions. And then I went for a blood test, lipid profile about a couple of years after that again. So my cholesterol initially was, total cholesterol was borderline. My LDL was a little high. HDL, which is the good cholesterol, was low, and triglycerides were high. When I went again for the test, then my cholesterol parameters were normal, but my triglycerides were still elevated. So I still needed to cut down on my calorie consumption and engage in more physical activity. So at that point, I did some soul searching and I thought about what is it that I'm doing wrong. And then I realized that I enjoyed my coffee. So on a daily basis, I was having anywhere from 4 to 6 cups of coffee, and I was adding cream and sugar each time, right? And so that stood out to me as could be one of the contributing factors. So what I did was I just cut all cream and sugar out. I went for black coffees from that point onwards. Also, instead of taking the elevator at our TCC campus, I started taking the stairs, started brisk walking on a regular basis. Um, and lo and behold, over the next 3 months, I lost 50 pounds just by restricting cream and sugar in my coffee and being more physically active. And sure enough, when I went for my lipid profile a third time, everything had normalized at that point. All right, so that was a big eye opener for me, like how much of a difference these small lifestyle changes can make for you, even though you might have the genetics for a certain disorder or disease, right? So genetics certainly set you up for that disease, but don't give you that disease. That is where your lifestyle choices come into play. All right, so different types of fats as we are seeing here, saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. The difference, saturated fats are solid fats. They are animal fat. They have a single bond between carbon atoms, as you can see here, like cheese and margarine and butter and palm oil and coconut oil. This is something that we have to be careful about. You can consume it in dairy products, etc., in little quantities, but saturated fat will certainly be much harder to break down, and this starts to build up very fast in your system, as opposed to unsaturated fatty acids, which are liquid. They are oils at room temperature, and they have a double bond in between carbon atoms, like sunflower oil, olive oil. These are certainly healthier, but again, moderation is the key. And then polyunsaturated fatty acids, which have two or more double bonds in between carbon atoms. They again are liquid at room temperature, like corn oil, soybean oil, so on and so forth. Again, healthy in moderation. Cholesterol, this is animal fat. The only way you can get cholesterol is from animals. And you don't need it. Basically, your liver makes all the cholesterol that you would ever need. On top of it, you can consume small quantities of it. The problem is we don't stick to small quantities, right? Most of our uh, uh, food is derived from animal sources, burgers and steaks and beef and all that, and that is rich with cholesterol. And even though you need cholesterol for like your cell membrane formation, for your hormone formation as well, all your sex hormones are derived from cholesterol. If you're low on cholesterol, you will not even hit puberty. But your steroid hormones are derived from cholesterol. But again, we are consuming way more than is needed. Our liver basically makes all the cholesterol that you need. If you are vegan, then you are not making any cholesterol, or rather consuming any cholesterol whatsoever. Uh, Instead, what you're getting is something called sitosterol, which is, you can call it plant cholesterol, right? So-called plant cholesterol, which is, again, much, much healthier than actual cholesterol, which is animal cholesterol, okay? So going on a vegetarian diet, again, uh, should bring your cholesterol levels within normal limits. All right, so next up we have proteins here, and proteins are the building blocks of life, right? So they are the wear and tear materials, and how much you need depends on your activity levels, your age, your sex, your health status, all of those things, such as if you're pregnant, as you can see here, or you are a bodybuilder, or you have had a fever, or you suffer from a chronic illness, your protein needs requirements would be very different from someone who does not have those conditions. So 8 of the amino acids out of the 20 or so that we have are essential, which means they have to be obtained only from diet, but the other 12 are non-essential, which means our bodies basically are able to synthesize or manufacture those amino acids. So then you have complete versus incomplete proteins here. Complete proteins are the ones that have all the essential amino acids, and those would be animal products, right? So again, if you're vegan, then you have a problem here. You're not going to get complete protein with a single plant or vegetable diet. Uh, so you need to mix like lentils with non-lentils and a bunch of different vegetables together to get all of your complete protein picture here, right? Incomplete proteins, again, they do not contain all essential amino acids. They're plant proteins. So you have to be careful there, as we see here. Vegetarians are people who do not eat meat, poultry, and fish, but vegetarian comes in many different sizes and shapes and forms, such as vegans who do not consume any animal product, period, right? So that's the strictest form of vegetarianism. Then you have lacto-ovo vegetarians that do not eat animal flesh, but they will consume dairy products and eggs, and of course vegetables, right? Then you also have pescatarians, which I myself am for the most part, right? Pescatarians. Um, so they consume fish or seafood and vegetables, right? Fish and vegetables are on the menu for pescatarians. Um, and so many studies have shown that the healthiest diet of all, of course, as I mentioned before, is the Mediterranean diet, right? And I mentioned what Mediterranean diet is: olive oil, beans, lentils, vegetables, fruits, red wine, lots of water, right? Uh, not much red meat, not much complex processed foods or refined sugars. So that is the most recommended diet. Then also something called the flexitarian diet, okay? And flexitarian diet actually refers to those people who would uh, mostly be vegetarians on a regular basis, but once in a while they will incorporate meat into their diet as well. Flexitarian, they're flexible, right? Um, Pescatarian, again, that would be seafood and vegetables. So all three are pretty good in terms of your health profile, okay? Anything where you are consuming animal meat on a regular basis and incorporating more plants and vegetables, it's considered healthy. So nitrogen balance is what you're looking at in terms of if you're building tissue versus if you're breaking down tissue, right? So positive nitrogen balance means you're making muscle, you are eating enough protein to make your body tissue. Negative nitrogen balance is when you have a fever, when you have cancer or some other chronic illness and your body tissues are breaking down. That is basically when you go into negative nitrogen balance, okay? So general function of both sugars and starch, energy provision. They are our chief source of energy to power our body, sugars and starch. Which one is better? Starch, polysaccharides, complex carbohydrate, much better than refined sugar. Uh, and honey, that's something else. Honey, I mean, in small quantities, it's okay, but honey basically is bee food and should not be a staple of human diet, personally, okay? So I would stay away from it, especially if you have borderline sugar, pre-diabetic and those kinds of things. So honey is extremely rich in calories and, of course, fructose, which is refined sugar. How does dietary fiber differ from other dietary carbohydrates? Dietary fiber cannot be digested or broken down. It passes as is, but it's extremely healthy and important to regulate your bowels and to prevent constipation and colorectal cancer. What are two primary functions of fats? Long-term energy reserve, they give you long-term energy, and also insulate your organs. All right, they provide insulation to your organs. Explain the general differences in animal proteins and plant proteins in terms of obtaining. So animal proteins have all the essential amino acids. Plant proteins are incomplete proteins. So you have to mix different types of plants in order to get adequate nutrition. How may a vegetarian obtain all of the essential amino acids? By mixing different vegetables together, again. So next up, we have vitamins, and vitamins are what? Vital vitamins. They only come from living things. So they are organic. They are organic molecules, okay? Vitamins do not give you energy. They don't give you any calories, but they're needed in small quantities to regulate your metabolism. And they are also divided into water soluble versus fat soluble ones. Which ones are fat soluble? Remember CADE, K-A-D-E. Those four vitamins are fat soluble. Vitamin B and C are water soluble. Uh, they are also essential or non-essential. Essential ones are those that you have to take in your diet, like vitamin A. And non-essential are the ones that your gut biota, your gut bacteria can make for you, like vitamin B and vitamin K. So water-soluble vitamins, they can dissolve in water, like B and C, okay? Vitamin B is needed for coenzymes in your metabolism, also for healthy nervous system. Vitamin C is required for a healthy immune system, for wound healing, for collagen uh, formation, and for all those kinds of things. All right. The thing with water soluble vitamins is you cannot overdose on them because they're water soluble. So if you do have an overdose, you can always pass them out in your urine. Fat soluble vitamins, you cannot pee them out, literally. So they stick around in your fat tissue and they can cause toxic symptoms. So vitamin K, A, D, and E, they are stored in your fat tissue and they can become toxic if taken in excess. Uh, so why do you need them? Well, vitamin A for your visual pigment retinal. It's good for your vision. Vitamin D for calcium absorption from your GI tract for healthy bones and teeth. Vitamin E for your cell membrane stability. Vitamin K for blood clotting. Those are the functions. So essential vitamins are vitamin A and C. They have to be taken in from your diet. And again, if you tend to suffer from colds, even COVID-19, which is a cold type of a cold virus, right? So vitamin C is extremely helpful for a healthy immune system. Okay, so eat a lot of oranges, citrus fruits, pineapple, lemon, lime, all of those things, tangerines, uh, because they will help you build strong immunity against colds again. So pretty good there. Okay, non-essential vitamins. Um, and they are again used as cofactors, which means they help with your metabolism. Okay. Minerals, these are inorganic. So minerals are not made by living things necessarily. They're derived from the Earth's crust, uh, like iron. And iron is needed for forming hemoglobin, which is the oxygen-carrying pigment in our blood, right? And it also used in mitochondria for electron transport to generate ATP. Calcium, again, for healthy bones, teeth, for healthy skeleton, blood clotting, and also muscle contraction. That's where calcium is needed. Sodium and potassium for sodium-potassium ion channels in our nerves. They literally make up our nervous system. Iodine is needed for your thyroid hormones. Zinc is needed for wound healing and also protein synthesis, okay? And they're all essential, so you must obtain them from your diet. So then major minerals are those that you need more of uh, as required to trace minerals. So if you need more than 100 milligrams of a mineral per day, that's major. So that includes calcium, potassium, phosphorus, chloride, magnesium. Trace minerals, you need less than 100 milligrams per day of, like chromium, copper, iodine, iron, zinc, etc. So iron came as a surprise to me because iron makes out of hemoglobin. I thought it would be one of the major minerals, but interestingly, it's a trace mineral, okay? And remember, females lose more iron than men for at least three reasons, which we're going to look at here. So iron deficiency is quite common, again, in females. Why? Three reasons. So three reasons for iron deficiency in females, right? Number one, they menstruate, so they lose anywhere from 1 to 2 milligrams of iron on a monthly basis, more so than men. Second, females have a smaller body mass index than males, so they make less iron. Third, uh, females do not have as much testosterone as males. The average female has about 10 times less testosterone as the average male, and testosterone makes you make more red blood cells, more iron absorption, so they don't. And another tragic fact is that in much of the world, females do not have equal access to high quality proteins as compared to males. And so therefore they do not make as much, uh, have access to as many iron containing foods as males. So that's why iron deficiency anemia is so much more common in females. You can get iron from like meat, spinach, kale, these green leafy vegetables, right? And if not, then you become anemic, not as many red blood cells. So weakness, pale skin, pallor, all of those things is what you would see here. Which vitamins are water soluble? B and C. Which are fat soluble? K, A, D, and E. Which of these groups may be dangerous in excess? The fat-soluble ones, because you cannot literally urinate them out. What are the major minerals? Calcium, phosphorus, potassium, uh, sodium, so on and so forth. What are the trace minerals? Chromium, copper, zinc, iron. How are these two groups distinguished? If you need more than 100 milligrams per day, it's major. If less than 100 milligrams, then it's minor. So here you are looking at what is called the My Plate from the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture recommendation. This is how much you should consume on a daily basis. Look, most are vegetables and fruits. This is the Mediterranean diet, and grains. That's and protein, good protein, like fish, like seafood, right? Uh, so this is the Mediterranean diet, literally, and some dairy. This is Mediterranean diet in a nutshell, as you can see here. Okay, this is what is recommended. Always read your food labels. Personally, when I look at the food label, my eyes are drawn without exception first to the sugars, okay? So on food labels, my eyes drawn to sugar content on food labels, okay? So if greater than greater than 10 grams, avoid. That's a general rule for me, nothing more than 10 grams, okay? After I look at sugar, my second, then I look at fat, saturated fat here, okay? And then finally I look at sodium. So uh, these are the three things. The most dangerous, sugar, then saturated fat, which includes cholesterol, and then sodium or salt. These three things are, all right, in that order. So that's what I have to keep an eye out for. So sugar, then saturated fat, and then salt or sodium. The three ingredients that you have to keep an eye out for. Make sure you are not exceeding the recommended dietary allowance on those three. So always read your labels. Don't just buy food off the shelf without thinking. So what categories of food are shown on the USDA My Plate? Grains, dairy, fruits, vegetables, and protein. Which food category takes up the largest portion? Vegetables. That's the Mediterranean diet. What is the purpose of the requirements for nutritional labeling on packaged food? So you can make informed, healthy decisions as to what you're taking in your system. You are what you eat, and your body will reflect that. Your health will reflect that. All right, so next up, we are looking at something called the absorptive state, which basically lasts for about 4 to 6 hours after you eat. All right. And again, the more the fat content in your food, the longer the time that it will stay in your intestine, and the higher your chances of developing constipation and cancer. So avoid too much fat, animal fat in your diet. Blood glucose levels have to be maintained within these levels, 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter, and that is done by means of hormones like insulin, right? So insulin is released postprandially, which means right after you have eaten a meal. And what it does is it stimulates your liver and your muscle cells to form glycogen. So it takes up all of the sugar, the simple sugar, and it uh, puts those sugar glucose molecules together in long chain molecules called glycogen, and this glycogen is stored in your muscle and in your liver. So the more muscular you are, if you work out, you can store more sugar as glycogen in your muscles, and your chances of developing diabetes go down substantially, right? What does it do to your fat tissue? It basically stimulates lipogenesis. It makes you put on fat. So insulin is good for your sugar, but it also makes you put on fat. And if I remember correctly, I talked about those female athletes, poor teenagers who were not taking their insulin shots before their major tournaments that were happening, inter-school tournaments, games, and they didn't take their insulin shots because they didn't want to put any extra fat at that time. And unfortunately, they went into diabetic coma and even passed away because of that reason, okay? All right, so something to keep in mind. So again, it's all about balance. So teen-aged female athletes and diabetic ketoacidosis. All right. It also makes you build muscle at the same time, insulin, okay? So glucagon is the exact opposite. It's the antagonistic hormone to insulin. So what does it do? It makes your Uh, Liver and muscle cells release glucose from glycogen. So your blood glucose levels go higher with glucagon. They cause you to break down your fat. So you become skinnier with glucagon. It doesn't do anything to your protein levels, okay? So how does the storage of nutrient molecules change during the absorptive state? Well, it is called the absorptive state because you're absorbing all of the nutrients from your gut into your bloodstream. What is the major regulatory hormone in the post-absorptive state? Insulin. Its functions: insulin causes glycogenesis, insulin causes protein synthesis, and insulin causes lipogenesis, okay? Cholesterol, what is it? It's a type of waxy fat which is made by your liver from the food that you eat, but you can also consume cholesterol if you eat animal foods of any type, right? Uh, and what happens here is it is cholesterol is synthesized by means of a process called beta oxidation, as you can see here, okay? So the enzyme that makes cholesterol is something called HMG coenzyme A or HMG CoA reductase. So many of those anti-cholesterol drugs that you take, like statins, right, like Lipitor, which atorvastatin, and all of those statin drugs, they are actually HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors. They inhibit the synthesis of cholesterol by your liver, so they bring your cholesterol levels down. Okay, so statins like Lipitor or Zocor, statins, Lipitor, Zocor, etc., are HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors. That's what they are, and that's how they control your cholesterol levels. Okay. So what happens to fat once it's in your blood? It is turned into very low density lipoproteins, or VLDLs, as you can see here. And then part of that is used in the synthesis of bile. All right, so the bile salts actually come from fats, as you can see here. All right, so here is the cholesterol synthesis, and you need the enzyme called HMG-CoA for your liver to make cholesterol, okay? Lipoproteins, that's a mixture of proteins or carrier proteins that carry lipids with them, right? Like chylomicrons. And lipoproteins can be divided into these classes: VLDL for very low density lipoproteins, then LDL with low density lipoproteins, and then HDL for high density lipoproteins. So these two, VLDL and LDL, they are called the bad cholesterol, so-called bad cholesterol. Why? Because when you say low density, that means it has a lot of fat. Remember, fat is very less dense than water. So the more the low density content, the more fat is in there. High density means it's heavy, which means there's less fat in it. So high density HDL is good cholesterol, less fat. LDL is bad cholesterol, more fat. Okay, so uh, bad cholesterol, which is LDL, VLDL, bad cholesterol versus good cholesterol. That's the difference, right? LDL has a lot more fat in it than HDL. So what are VLDLs? Are very low density lipoproteins. That's how your fats get absorbed in your bloodstream from the gut, right? In the form of triglycerides. This is your primary adipose tissue. So after some of those triglycerides let go of some of the fat, then they turn into low density or LDL protein, okay? You have high amounts of cholesterol here. And what LDLs do is they carry this cholesterol and deposit it in your body cells, including your heart cells and brain cells. Not a good thing. That's setting you up for a heart attack or a stroke. Okay, so low density lipoproteins is the bad type of fat or bad type of cholesterol. High density lipoproteins, these are formed in the liver, and they actually take cholesterol and fats from your body and redeposit them back into the liver. They collect cholesterol, this gunk from all of your cells, and take them back for the liver for storage. So it's a good type of cholesterol. So you would likely like to have high levels of HDL and low levels of LDL. So high HDL, H for high, HDL, and low LDL. That is the ideal situation that you are seeing here. And how you can do that, again, going on a Mediterranean diet, exercise, okay, keeping your triglyceride levels down, um, If need be, then you have to take statins, the drugs which are cholesterol lowering drugs. But remember, once you are on statins, then you have to stay on them for throughout your life, because again, you are shutting down the enzyme that makes cholesterol in your liver, right? So that's an ongoing thing. So the liver does a number of different functions for your body. It's the body's detox center. It detoxifies the drugs and food products that you eat. It's also involved with carbohydrate and protein and lipid metabolism, right? All of that. So many important functions. Here we are looking at good cholesterol versus bad cholesterol and why they're called that. Uh, Statin drugs, they are HMG-CoA inhibitors. What are some risk factors for high cholesterol? Number one, genetics. Look at your family members. If they tend to suffer from high cholesterol, I'm afraid you are at risk for that as well, right? Then, of course, diet and exercise. Uh, the more animal fat and excess calories that you consume, the more overweight you are, the higher your chances of having high cholesterol levels. Exercise, that's a big one. If you don't get aerobic activity, at least brisk walking every day, 15 to 20 minutes, then again, you're not meeting the minimum requirements of activity set forth by the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association. Just do it for your own sake. Cigarette smoking, too much caffeine, stress, they will all negatively impact your cholesterol levels. Some things to keep in mind, all right? So at this point, let me take some time to talk about my own health mantra, something that I refer to as D-LMP. And I will tell you what that actually means, all right? So the D-DES, so the first D is for declutter, okay? And I'll explain what that means. And then the second D is for diet. E is for exercise. S is for stress management, okay? The second S is for sleep. The third S is for sex. The L is for laughter and learning. The M is for meditation, not medication, ideally meditation. And P is for uh, uh, passion, is for passion and purpose. Okay, so let's talk about what do I mean by each. Declutter. Declutter your physical space. Get rid of all the extra junk that might be bogging you down. It can actually make you physically sick if you have too much clutter. Get rid of it, right? Physical space. And declutter your lungs, your stomach, and your mind. That's what you do. How do you declutter your lungs? Don't smoke, don't vape, don't live in a toxic environment where there's like a lot of pollution, smog in your environment, all right? Countryside, fresh air. Uh, that is how you declutter your lungs, all right? Don't smoke. That's the main thing that you can do. Declutter your stomach. Don't overeat. Don't eat the bad kinds of food. Don't eat processed foods. Too much red meat, too much animal fat. Mediterranean diet, more plants and vegetables, right? How do you declutter your mind? Plug out, plug away from social media, internet, reading all this toxic stuff, right? Keep your mind empty. Focus, meditate, enjoy nature, be outdoors, all right? So declutter your mind. Don't let all of this negativity get into your head as well. Or, all right, diet. What type of diet again? Uh, Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean, small portions of Mediterranean diet, okay? Broken down into many small meals throughout the day rather than three big meals, smaller meals, but of fruits and vegetables, okay? Exercise, both aerobic, which means like walking, tennis, swimming, dancing, whatever, aerobic, and anaerobic, which means weightlifting. Both are important, right? Anaerobic, at least 3 times per week for at least 30 minutes. Go on a walk where you walk briskly, your heartbeat picks up, all right, or dance or Zumba, or whatever, swimming, play some game, whatever works for you. And anaerobic, weightlifting. You don't have to like buy weights necessarily. Carry your grocery bags if you have stairs up and down, anything that stresses your muscles, all right? Do it as regularly as you can. Stress management, manage your stress. If you need a like a that scrunchy ball, stress relieving balls or anything, sometimes it means changing your job, sometimes it means making some hard decisions, sometimes Doing yoga or taking a bubble bath, listening to music, uh, decrease stress levels, okay? Keep your stress levels down. Okay, sex. Studies have shown that people who orgasm 1 to 2 orgasms per week on an average live about 7 to 8 years longer than people who don't orgasm. Why? Maybe they're orgasming because their stress levels are low, right? So they're in better health, so they orgasm more. That's one reason. Another reason could be because when you orgasm, you release all of these feel-good hormones like dopamine, right? Dopamine and oxytocin, right? And these are stress lowering themselves. It strengthens your immunity. Orgasm and sex actually strengthens your immunity and brings your cortisol or stress hormone levels down and increases your feel good hormone levels. You live longer, okay? Uh, Sleep. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep consistently on a daily basis. Good news, if you can't do it on a daily basis, sleep in on weekends and take these naps, steal these cat naps, 15-minute, 10-minute cat naps here and there. They all add up. Sleep is big on that, right, for good health. Yeah, laughter and learning. Keep things light, sense of humor, laugh. Laughing again brings your cortisol levels down, increases your oxytocin and dopamine levels, which are feel good hormones. Learning, keep learning. The more you keep your brain active, the stronger your immunity, the lesser your chances of developing chronic disease. So laughter and learning, keep taking college classes. Use that mind. Your chances of developing Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and those kinds of chronic neurodegenerative diseases goes down. Meditation, meditate. For some people, that just means doing yoga, sitting out in nature and just letting their mind be free. For other people, it might be just relaxing, being in the zone when you're like not pressured and you're taking slow, gentle breaths and you're just thinking about, some natural phenomena or something like that. Whatever, take a break from the hustle and bustle. Meditate. And then finally, P for passion and purpose. Have Follow things that you're passionate about. Follow a career path, follow your lifestyle that you feel passionate about. Don't settle down for decisions that others make for you, whether it's your profession or who to marry or who to get along with or what to think. You are in charge of your own destiny. So know your passions, know yourself first and follow them and don't let up ever. And then purpose, find your purpose in life. Everyone is here. If you're alive, whether it seems apparent to you or not, you are here for a purpose. Find it and work on it. If you were not needed, then nature would weed you out. It'll take you out. You don't have to kill yourself to do that, okay? No need. Nature will do that for you. But if you're here, alive, kicking, you have some reason. You have some purpose. Find it and follow it, okay? All right, so that was my health mantra that I just shared with you. Is cholesterol synthesis increased or decreased in response to high dietary intake of cholesterol? Decreased. That's negative feedback. Okay, what are the two fates of cholesterol following its synthesis? It could be turned into either LDL or HDL. LDL is bad cholesterol, HDL is good cholesterol. Which molecular structure is responsible for transporting cholesterol from peripheral tissue to the liver? The good type, HDL, high density lipoprotein. Uh, an example for each of the five categories of liver functions: it stores carbs, it stores proteins, it stores fats, it detoxifies drugs, and it detoxifies food substances as well. All right, so next up, we're looking at the steps of respiration, cellular respiration, which we have talked about before. So basically, we are just going to uh, look at a summary of that, right? So here's your mitochondrium, one of the mitochondria in your cells, and this is your respiratory cycle. It starts with something called glycolysis, right? Which literally means you take a glucose molecule outside of the mitochondrium. Glycolysis takes place in your cytoplasm, outside the mitochondrium. And you split that glucose molecule into two 3-carbon pyruvate molecules, as you can see here, right? And that releases two ATPs actually, two ATPs, okay? Then these pyruvate enter what is called the acetyl citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle here. All right, many steps, but what you have to remember is two more ATPs are released out of this step. Finally, uh, you enter the electron transport chain here, and that releases another 32 to 34 ATPs. So in total, how many ATPs did you generate out of these three cycles? So 34 plus 2 is 36, plus 2 is 38. So anywhere from 36 to 38 ATPs is what you generate when you go through these respiratory cycles. Okay, that's what we have to remember. All right. So next up, we're talking about the metabolic rate. What is it? How fast you burn your calories, how fast you process your food. That's what metabolism is. So how do you find your basal metabolic rate? That is the amount of energy that you use at rest. So for example, if you're a physically active person and you eat right and you exercise right, your basal metabolic rate would be higher. You're burning more calories even when you're sitting or sleeping, versus someone who is not so healthy, their metabolism would be much slower. How can you spike up your metabolism? By being more physically active, by eating better, by drinking lots of water. Okay, that's going to spike up your metabolic rate. Metabolism is again mostly set by your genetics. So there are like genetic slow metabolizers and genetic fast metabolizers. All right. So much of the metabolism, 70% of your metabolism is genetic. It's determined by your ancestors, right? So your BM, sorry, BMR is 70% genetic again. Okay, so how do you measure your basal metabolic rate anyway? Two ways, by a calorimeter versus a respirometer. What's the difference? In calorimeter, it's like you sit in a bathtub filled with water, water-filled chamber, and then the heat released from your body is actually measured by how much the temperature of the water surrounding you goes up, and that gives you the basal metabolic rate. Because remember, your metabolism is what calorie is a measure of your temperature. Uh, a calorie is the amount of heat that is required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So the more hot you are, the more fast your basal metabolic rate. Or you can use a respirometer where you literally breathe out into this respirometer uh, um, device, and it measures the amount of oxygen that you're consuming. So it's an indirect measure of your basal metabolic rate, how much oxygen you're consuming to produce those ATPs, all right? So your basal metabolic rate depends on a number of factors like your sex, age, your body type, your lifestyle factors, right? But as a general rule, the older you get, the more your basal metabolic rate decreases, about 3% each decade after age 30. So how can you counter that? Get more physically active. Advancing age is no excuse for slowing down. Rather, it's more excuse for speeding up because your metabolism is going down as is. So become more physically active, right? If the more lean body mass that you have, less body fat, the higher your basal metabolic rate. Then there are some pathological conditions that can cause your metabolic rate to slow down, like hypothyroidism, which is way more common in women, especially after pregnancy, right? So you have low levels of thyroid hormones, low metabolic rate, so you have to supplement with thyroid hormones there. Losing weight does wonders for your metabolic rate, okay? So this is what your total metabolic rate basically boils down to: the amount of skeletal muscle, how much muscle you have and how much you use those muscles, the type of foods that you eat, and uh, if you, again, remember how much I was talking about walking in the cold weather, right? Taking walks because of this. When you expose yourself to cold temperatures, you burn more calories. Your metabolism actually ramps up. So cold weather is not such a bad thing. It's actually ideal for exercise unless you have cold sensitivity or something like that, or a heart condition. Actually, subjecting yourself to controlled doses of cold will speed up your metabolism, make you healthier. All right. Okay, so what is our normal body temperature? 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, relatively constant. Your hypothalamus is the part of the brain that keeps your core body temperature constant there, okay? And so when your body temperature increases, such as when you're feeling hot, uh, your sweat glands are stimulated, so you sweat out more, which releases the heat. And you also have vasodilation in the blood vessels closer to your skin, so you lose all of that heat to the environment. All right, so what happens when you get cold? The exact opposite. The sweat glands are inhibited, and then vasoconstriction in the blood vessels close to your skin. That's why instead of blushing now, you turn blue because all of the blood has been diverted away to your critical organs and to your muscles, all right, rather than your skin. All right. So hormones also help you. regulate your temperature, like thyroid. The thyroid is your chief hormone as far as your metabolism is concerned. So again, if you take a walk out in the cold, your temperature drops, your hypothalamus will respond by releasing increased levels of TRH, which is thyrotropin releasing hormone, which will stimulate your anterior pituitary to release TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone, which will cause your thyroid gland to release more T3 and T4, thyroxine and triiodothyronine, and those hormones will increase your metabolic rate. So, great way of losing weight: exercise in cold weather, take cold weather walks. On the other hand, heat cramps, that happens when you lose excessive amounts of fluid, you are dehydrated in hot, humid weather. If you're exercising in hot conditions, that can give you heat cramps because you lose electrolytes and water. It can even progress to heat exhaustion, where your core body temperature is up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That's quite hot. And so then you have nausea, vomiting, weakness, headaches, those kinds of things. All right. And then heat stroke is when your body temperature is even higher than 104 degrees. And that is dangerous because here you even stop sweating. Even your sweat glands are overwhelmed. You're completely dehydrated. And this can be fatal if you do not administer fluids to this person, start an IV infusion of fluids and uh, gradually cool him down. This would be fatal. So hypothermia, the other extreme, if you're caught in a blizzard or in an avalanche, your body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that will cause hypothermia, right? So again, you have to gradually warm up this person. So wrap him in blankets and then gradually warm him up. Frostbite is when your fingers or toes or ears or nose and any appendage has been exposed to cold temperatures. So all of the blood supply to your extremities is diverted away to your critical organs, and so your fingers and toes die out. They necrose literally because of lack of blood supply. The blood has been diverted inwards to your critical organs, and so this causes necrosis, and then uh, it might turn gangrenous, dry gangrene, as you can see here, which means that it's dead. So you have to amputate, you have to cut out that body part to prevent infection from spreading elsewhere, right? And that body part is useless. It's necrosed anyway. So would your total metabolic rate increase when you exited your home on a cold winter day? Absolutely. Best way of losing extra calories. What is the core body temperature? 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. Why must it be maintained? Because your enzymes function and your metabolism functions within very narrow limits of temperature. So if your temperature fluctuates too much, your enzymes will get denatured, your metabolism will stop. Explain the role of the hypothalamus in regulating the response to an increase in body temperature. Hypothalamus will sense this and cause your sweat glands to secrete more sweat and will cause vasodilation in your skin arteriole so you can lose more heat to the environment. Okay, done with our chapter 27 as well. So I'll be sending out this recording in different chunks this time because it shut down on me, and we'll be sending you pictures and snapshots of my notes that I took. So remember to turn in your lab work by tonight. I have sent out my study guide for your lab exam next week. Start studying for it. Keep up with your study guides. Keep up with your Connect quizzes and your case studies. All of those are due. All right, so on top of all that, enjoy your weekend. Have a wonderful time. Stay happy, healthy, and safe. And so I'll see you all then next Saturday. Enjoy till then. Bye-bye.